Hey everybody, I'm Casey Davidson, host of the Put 'em Back podcast. Before we jump into this month's episode with Matt Perkinson from the Department of Natural Resources here in South Carolina, wanted to do a quick plug for a fishing tournament we're putting on. It's open to every angler in the state of South Carolina. It's for redfish, trout, and flounder, and it's a catch and release only tournament where you can measure your 3 longest fish and compete over an entire week. So it runs from September 3rd to the 13th. And 100% of the proceeds go to supporting conservation here in the state of South Carolina. So check out our first annual Put 'em Back fishing tournament, and we'll drop the link below. So let's jump right into this month's episode. We're so excited to have Matt here today to talk about a topic that I know you all love. It is probably, I would say, Matt, arguably the most important and most sought after game fish, probably in the entire East Coast, the red drum. So I called them redfish growing up. My dad calls them spot-tailed bass, redfish, but in essence, we're all talking about the red drum. So I'm going to kick it over to you. I recently attended a redfish summit that Matt put on up at Fort Johnson at the Department of Natural Resources. And it really opened my eyes to what's going on, what's the state of the redfish here in South Carolina. So I'm going to kick it over to you, Matt, and let's talk about red drum.
Sure. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me. So you mentioned our redfish summits. South Carolina Department of Natural Resources has been doing a series of both focus groups, surveys to try to find out from our anglers what they're seeing in the red drum population. And the reason that what really kicked that off is we just had a recent regional stock assessment and a state stock assessment for red drum. And you know, I won't get too deep into the details other than to say both of those found that the population is in decline. We're concerned about the population of red drum and the amount of fishing pressure that we've seen in the Southeast in general, and for our stock of red drum, that being the east coast of Florida, Georgia, and South Carolina are all part of that southeastern red drum stock. So both regionally, we've seen a decline in those fish, and then also in South Carolina, we've seen a decline.
And is that what you're hearing from anglers on the water too in these summits?
We have. When you really dig in, folks can still go out and they can catch red drum. You press them on it, you talk about it a little bit, and what they'll say is, yeah, we're still catching fish, but we're not seeing as many schools as we used to see. We're not seeing as many fish in a school as there used to be.
That's the big thing I've noticed, like my time on the water, is that exact thing. I would go out to Isle of Palms when I was in college and fish, and you'd see schools of 50, 100 fish, and now some of those same populations I'm finding, just obviously I'm one person, but are in that 20 type fish range. And so, but that's what you're hearing from anglers kind of across the entire state?
Yeah, same thing, pretty much across the state. Where sometimes what used to be 500 fish schools, and maybe there would be 2 to 3 different schools in a particular area. Now there's one school and there's 50, 75 fish in that school. Sometimes there's 20, 30 fish in a school. So if you're an angler who knows what you're doing, you can probably still go out, you can target that school, you might still catch 3, 4 fish, but it's not the same as when we had multiple schools in that same area, and that's not a picture of health for the fishery, I guess.
Right. So besides that, though, this initial data you're talking about that shows a decline, the stock assessments you mentioned, how is that data collected and analyzed, and how long have y'all been doing that data to kind of see, and like what's the bell curve been like on the data that you've seen on redfish in South Carolina?
Yeah, so regionally, like I mentioned, that's east coast of Florida, Georgia, South Carolina. All the data that the different states collect go into the stock assessment. All of the catch data and all of what we call our independent sampling data. So our trammel net survey, our electrofishing survey, our longline survey, all that goes in. A lot of the smartest stock assessment scientists around pull that data together, they model it, and they project, what is the trend in the fishery and what does it look like in the future.
I wanted to walk you through one of the most exciting new products that we've come out with. It's our new titanium pliers. These are fully machined titanium pliers, and I'm just gonna do a quick unboxing here for you. So you'll see just beautifully packaged. You open these up, grab out your titanium pliers. The first thing you'll notice on these is the weight. So it's not like your run-of-the-mill aluminum pair pliers. They've got some heft to them, so it's a pretty heavy product. The other thing that I like on this product is the easy release. So you can see this little latch spring loaded, so those pop right open, so you can get to them quickly. But then if you want to store them, you can just close that latch. Another thing I love about this product is the carbide cutter. So you can cut anything from, fluorocarbon all the way up to 100-pound braid with these cutters. And then from a design perspective, we didn't see any pliers on the market with this trigger design. So your finger goes right in that trigger. And then getting deeper into the package, you lift this up and it actually comes with a pretty cool sheath. So this is our sheath design. It comes with a strap on the back where you can attach this to your belt, or you could even put it around like a post in your boat or rod holder. And it comes with a nice lanyard as well that stretches out, so you can have this on your side. This is the new titanium plier from Toadfish. Check it out. It retails for $198 on our website. Just for our listeners that don't know what those things are, because I honestly didn't know what they were until I went to the Redfish Summit. So walk me through, like, what is trammel net data? What is electrofishing? Because I think it's kind of interesting how you're collecting the data.
Probably our best picture of what the red drum population looks like in South Carolina comes from our trammel net survey. If you live in coastal South Carolina, you may have seen these boats. They're kind of funny looking. They've got the motor sort of amidship there, and a couple hundred days a year, or 100+ days a year, they're out on our estuaries coastwide. They run a 600-foot net around a section of bottom. They spook fish out from the bank into that net. They go through, they measure fish, they put tags, they take genetic samples. And that survey has been going on since the 1980s.
Wow.
So we're 35 years into it, basically.
Yeah, that's a lot of data.
The specific trammel net data, that survey was designed specifically to look at juvenile red drum. So it's really efficient at encircling these areas where red drum have been. Like I say, they do it up and down the coast. They do hundreds, maybe into the thousands of net sets that happen each year. And so what it's really good at is looking at how many fish were caught per net set, say in 1990, 2000, 2010, 2020. And we can look at trends in the population.
So what is that trend?
We've seen a decline, basically.
Like a 30-year decline.
A 30, with some peaks and valleys. We saw a good population of red drum in the early 2000s, decline a little bit, another good peak around 2010, and then since 2010, we've really seen a pretty steady decline in the number of red drum in South Carolina.
Yeah, that sucks. That's tough to hear, right? Like, as an angler that loves to catch redfish, that they're in trouble. Yeah,
it's difficult. There's really two things that can feed into that. It's how many fish are being added to the population every year, and how many are being pulled out of the population. We know that the amount of folks on the water continues to increase. There's a lot of stress on that resource, a lot of fish being pulled out. But we also haven't seen a great year of reproduction from those fish. We had one good one in maybe 2022, and that's the only one over the last 10 to 15 years, basically.
So let's talk about that a minute, right? Because I feel like as a culture, an angling culture over the last decade or more, catch and release for red drum has become very prevalent. What's the data saying on number of fish that we're taking out of the population versus what's being released?
So that's a good question. The number of fish that are really being just directly harvested by anglers, it's been pretty steady over time. South Carolina, we harvest about 300,000 fish per year. What's really changed is the number of fish that are caught and released. So let's say 30 years ago, we were catching and releasing 300,000 fish. Now we're catching and releasing about 2 million fish.
Wow.
Yeah. So
that's insane. So we're harvesting. So basically, we've been harvesting as a population. We're eating about 300,000 fish that are taken recreationally every year over a long period of time. That number stayed pretty steady.
Yeah.
But the number of people that catch and release fish, if you put that on a chart, that's exponentially growing.
That has grown a lot. And if you think about it, those fish are pretty tough. Most of them are going to survive. But if you catch 2 million of them, or you catch the same fish 6, 7, 8, from our tagging data 10, 12 times, it may have survived this release, but it might not have survived its third, fourth, fifth release over a couple of years. And so when you add the number of fish that are harvested directly and the fish, what we call release mortality, a fish that's been released, maybe didn't survive, maybe it was eaten by a dolphin or a shark, or just
so let's talk about
didn't get through it.
Because that's a hard one, right? I sell fishing products. I make fishing products. I love to fish. It's hard to tell anglers like, hey, let's not fish a red drum because that's not fun. Nobody wants to do that.
Right.
But what are some actionable things that we could do to help with this problem?
Yeah, good question. I fish for red drum, love them, target them up in the grass with a fly rod as much as I can. And so the biggest thing we can do is try to make sure that the fish that we do handle have the best chance of surviving after release, right?
So what are those tips?
Number one is reduce the time out of the water. We see it a lot. We see fish, being held up 3-4 in a shot to get that Instagram picture. You should really think about, can I get this fish out of the water? Maybe never remove it from the water and out of your rubber-coated net in the first place. Pop that.
Oh, that's another good
Rubber-coated net would be the other part.
Yeah, why is that? It's like what, the slime coat
You're
or something?
protecting the slime coat on that fish. I mean, they're less likely to get your hook tangled up in it as well, so
Right.
they're easier. But yeah, that rubber-coated net's going to protect the fish. We want to make sure that we can get that fish up, unhooked, and then back in the water, 15, 30 seconds max, basically. That's going to give that fish the best chance to swim off and survive.
I mean, that seems like common sense and something that we all could strive to do, right?
Yeah.
Like, you're taking a fish out of the water, it can't breathe, it lives in the water as quick as you can get it
Yeah.
in and off the hook. The other thing that I think I learned recently that I didn't necessarily know as a kid or growing up is like, suppose you do have a fish swallow a hook. What's the best practice there? Should we be getting our pliers and trying to wrench that hook out?
No.
Correct.
Yeah,
That's the other one. I was kind of leading the question
lead,
there.
Lead
but
me in that direction.
Yes, yeah.
No, yeah. I mean, unless that fish is somewhere where you can just pop a hook out very easily, you just cut it as close as you can to the
And leave the hook inside,
Leave the
right?
hook inside. They're very good at expelling objects from their body. That fish is going to have a very good chance of survival. A lot less chance of survival if you try to rip that hook out than if you just clip it.
I think that's a
and
huge one,
let
honestly,
them work
because
on
I
it.
think a lot of recreational anglers think that leaving the hook in potentially could be negative. But like you said, if he swallowed that hook and it's a small juvenile fish, even having the right pair of needle nose pliers to even get in that deep, it's better just to cut the hook right, like you said, as close as you
That's
can
right.
and leave the hook in.
That's right. Which also on that same point is, if you're using circle hooks, let's say you're fishing with natural bait, go for an inline circle hook. An offset circle hook, it's not as bad as a J hook, but it's gonna gut hook a lot more fish. So if you can find an inline circle hook where that point curves directly back towards the hook eye, that's
Another great tip, honestly. Yeah. We'll drop a link to some of the proper hooks for fishing live bait for redfish in our bio when we drop this one. So let's talk about the second component of this, right? So you talked about, hey, we're catching and releasing a lot more fish. Really what we can do there is handle them properly, be stewards of them where they're out of the water. But what about this big problem that you talked about where we haven't had a good spawn of breeding fish, where you're seeing those high numbers of those juvenile small reds that you were seeing back in the early 90s? What do you attribute that to? Is there anything we can do to help with the spawn of red drum in South Carolina?
Yeah, it's a complex issue. Red drum spawn typically in South Carolina, our peak spawning happens in August and September. It's a pretty short spawning window. And those fish are coming to our inlets, kind of big open water areas, gathering together, spawning. They need everything to be right during that short window to have a good year class of fish, basically. So temperature's got to be right. The wind patterns have got to be right. Salinity's got to be right. All these things have got to happen so that those eggs can make it up into the proper place in the marsh. They hatch out, those larvae survive, and they make it from 2 days old to 30 days old to 6 months old to eventually 10, 11 months when we start catching them on hook and line. And so one of the things that we're concerned about is the number of folks that target those big adult red drum, the bull red drum that we see. And I get it. They are they fight hard. They are fun to catch. That's a fish of a lifetime. But we've seen the number of folks target those fish has really increased over the last 10 to 15 years, and used to be something that really just happened in the fall. We see it now pretty much every month out of the year. And so our concern is number one, or some of those fish not surviving catch and release. But beyond that, if you catch a fish during the spawning period, or let's say right before they're going to spawn, you catch it in late July, or you catch it in August or September, not only did that fish survive, but did it actually spawn that year? Or did it spawn the next week?
Right. I mean, that makes sense, right? Like, you're a big pregnant female fish. You're coming in the jetties to spawn, lay your eggs, and you get hooked. Logically, that has to stress out that fish.
It can, yeah. It can change behavior so that those fish aren't gathering in the same places where they traditionally would spawn. It can also change their physiology. So that female may drop eggs prematurely, or she may have lower quality eggs or not as many of eggs, may not develop eggs in the same way.
Yeah, and this was super fascinating to me because, again, I think just as recreational anglers, it's this consciousness, right, that it's hard to get this data, or you really got to go look for it. And I think just us as anglers being conscious about when these spawning times are is important. So basically late July through September is when our red drum are spawning in the state of South Carolina. And you just heard it from the Department of Natural Resources. It would be great if we could lay off catching these big females and targeting these big fish during that period. So like in this tournament that we're putting on in September, we're only allowing fish up to 30 inches on the redfish to be measured. So that in an attempt to say, hey, you only can target inshore fish in September.
Right.
We're not even going to count anything over 30 inches, which would be a bigger breeder style fish. But I think that's a huge one that I want everyone to take away from this podcast. If you live in the state of South Carolina and you love to catch red drum, or you're down here on the coast, just be conscious that these big female fish that are near shore at the jetties are in there trying to do what we want them to do, which is spawn and spawn successfully. And by targeting them, we're messing up their spawning period, and we got to lay off them.
Yeah, that's going to make me unpopular with some folks to say that, I think. And it's certainly not illegal to go and target those fish. This is more of a, something that we're asking anglers to voluntarily. We're not saying don't fish for adult red drum. We're saying when the temperature is at its hottest in late July through September, those fish are spawning. There's the most sharks out there during that time.
That's actually another one I was going to bring up too, because you're 100%. Like, you don't know how many of those big fish that are tired out from that fight. There's so many sharks in the river that time of year when the weather's hot like that.
Sure.
So we have no idea how many of those fish are actually making it back through the sharks after they've been fought on light tackle and are tired and then got taken out of the water for 2 minutes to get photos with. Yeah,
there's always a possibility of shark depredation for sure, especially when the water's hot like that. Our biggest thing is that, those fish are still there in October and November. So if you want to target adult red drum.
And the fishing's fantastic.
And the fishing's really good. Those fish maybe are finished up with their spawning activity. The water temperature's starting to come down. And so if folks don't know, water temperature and oxygen go hand in hand. So the higher that water temperature is, the lower the oxygen is in the water. And
that's a great point.
Tougher it is for those fish to recover from being caught and released.
Yeah, it'd be like us climbing a mountain.
Yeah. In 100-degree weather. So as we get into October, November, water temperature's coming down. There's more oxygen in the water. We don't have as many sharks out there in the water as the water cools down, basically. So if you want to target those fish, obviously still do all those best fishing practices if you're going to fish for adult red drum that give them the best chance of surviving when you do catch them, but maybe lay off of them during that spawning
rubber
period.
Net, not out of the water long. If you can leave them in the water to take them off, that's probably a best practice.
Yeah.
And use inline circle hooks.
So we specifically recommend a short leader, very short, less than 6-inch leader with a fixed weight. And I can provide you a picture that you can show to your audience.
Yeah, so not a traditional 12-inch leader when you're targeting these big,
not a big sink or slide. The idea is that
small 6-inch
very
leader.
Short leader, and the fact that it's a fixed weight, which means you don't have a sinker sliding that can make that leader actually just effectively get longer, means that fish is more likely to get caught right in the corner of the mouth. and a big inline circle hook. You really can't go too big on an adult red drum. You could fish
like a 5.0.
You could go much bigger than that. You can go 8, 9, 10 aught.
Wow.
On that, those fish are going to come. They're like a vacuum cleaner. They come through, they pick that up, and you want them to get caught right here without any chance of that hook getting down into their gullet.
Right.
Yeah.
The other interesting thing, and I think this is more interesting than actionable, but what we talked about at the summit was, and it's just fresh in my mind, related to global climate change and sea temperature rising.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that is having an impact on those eggs as they're in this much hotter water in August and September, having the chance to make it to adulthood?
Potentially, yeah. There's a lot of things climate-wise that could have an impact on larval survival, the number of eggs that, wind patterns can change and make it so not as many eggs are making it into the proper place.
You mean like storms, like the more
hurricanes? Hurricanes we know can have an impact on fish populations, but just wind patterns can shift, and that can change where larvae ends up.
I think the nutshell there, though, is it, like you said before, it's almost like these perfect moment of all these factors have to come in play for those eggs to incubate properly and make it through.
That's right.
So I think the takeaway there is just how valuable every single one of those eggs is to give the best chance.
That's right. What we always tell folks is there are a lot of things in fisheries environmentally that are making things more difficult for fish. But that is all the more reason that we've got to be pretty conservative about the number of fish that we pull out of the population. We can't always control whether the water is going to be really hot in October or not, but we can control specifically how many fish that we're removing from that population.
Or how many we're stressing out while they're trying to spawn.
That's right. So we try to, with our anglers, we want them to focus on the things they can control, and that's their own actions.
No doubt. So like of a big breeder redfish, I don't know if it's the same as trout. We had David Flatt on a few months ago, and he was saying like 20 million eggs from a female breeder trout. Is that a similar number for red drum?
So a big female, when I worked 12 years with our stocking program, we'd get a spawn from a big female, maybe would put out about 1 million eggs at a time.
So
but they're
less
spawning,
than trout,
but they're spawning multiple times throughout that season.
Got it.
So.
And then of that number of eggs, like, is there any guess on the percentage of?
I wouldn't even begin to tell you. It's very, very small.
David was saying like one fraction of like 100th of 1% or something.
I'm sure that's where we're at. Yeah, it's a very small amount. That egg first has to hatch out, but then it needs to be in really high quality estuary environment where
with clean water,
the
right temperature,
with very small little animals that they can eat in those first couple days, graduating to slightly larger animals. Surviving the first month is probably a big impact on how good our year class of red drum is for the next year. Did we have the right conditions? After spawning, maybe during October and November, for those fish to survive to 1 to 2 inches. And that has a big impact on how many 15-inch fish are going to be there that next fall.
Did they have the right habitat to hide in? Do all those things? It's like, do you ever watch like at the aquarium when you go in and you see the sea turtle video? Like you got the sea turtle and then they got to get past the birds.
Yeah,
they got to get past this big fish. They got to make it to the water and not turn around and go to the lights. I think it's a very kind of similar situation here where it's like you got these little baby juvenile redfish, and what is the probability that they're going to make it through
it's a gauntlet
journey?
For sure. It is a gauntlet, and then you add our extra pressure on top of that. So, we just got to be very conservative about what we can control, which is, how we treat those fish we catch and how many we choose to keep.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, I love red drum. There's nothing like going out early morning, trying to catch a redfish on top water.
Yeah.
But even one thing I've done recently, and the hookup ratio is only slightly worse, is change out your treble for a single hook on your top waters, stuff like that. Again, just anything you can do to make these fish less stress, less hurt.
Yeah.
It's all just common sense things, I think, but it's just that consciousness, I think, that I would advocate for.
Yeah, and anybody who's taken, a couple different trebles, one stuck in their hand and one in the fish at the same time, can appreciate that a single hook's probably easier to deal with anyway. I've noticed the same thing as you. I don't see a huge difference on hook up on a topwater plug if I'm using a single hook versus a treble. So I switch all of mine out.
Yeah, this is just such a great conversation. It's so interesting, and I think the 30-year decline to me, when I heard that, when we had the Redfish Summit, was just such a wake-up call for me, because you don't think about it, right? Because you do have these resident schools that you've been fishing on for a number of years. You always can go out and consistently catch fish, and
right.
But to see that data was just so compelling to me, to see the bell curve downwards. I was like, oh my God, this is not good. Like, what can we do as anglers to stop this problem so that our kids have even better redfish populations to fish on than we did?
Yeah, I mean, I think the question is, what do we want a quality fishery to look like? And that, it depends on how long you've been fishing here. If you talk to somebody who moved here 2 years ago and they've never fished on red drum before, and they go out with a guide and they catch 6 fish in a day, they may think, man, this is an amazing population of red drum. But if somebody, has fished here for 30 years and they remember what it was like when there were 600 fish in that school, it's just a shifting baseline. So it's all about what's your experience, depending on who you talk to.
Yeah, I mean, I remember going out in Beaufort as a kid with my great-grandfather having 80, 100 fish days where it was all juvenile fish, but they were just so stacked that it was every single cast. And those days are definitely few and far between. And the data is showing that. It's interesting that I can't believe we catch and release 2 million red drum a year. That's just an absolutely mind-blowing number to even understand, because, I mean, really, the state of South Carolina doesn't even have that big of a population relative to other states, right? Like, there's less people in the state of South Carolina than the metropolitan area of Atlanta, Yeah. So it's wild to think about that many people and that much pressure on this fishery.
I think a good example of that is we run an volunteer angler tagging program. That's part of the program that I run. And we'll see sometimes a fish gets tagged, it's recaptured 5 times, 8 times. We've had fish that have been recaptured 13, 14 different times on the same fish. For one, that's a testament to that's a tough fish and it survived catch and release, and maybe somebody was pretty good with how they handled it, but it shows you the gauntlet that some of them go through, that they can be recaptured that many times over a couple of years, basically.
Awesome. Well, just to recap for our listeners, just an incredible conversation today with Matt Perkinson from the Department of Natural Resources here in South Carolina. There's some things we can do to help our declining redfish population. Sounds like it's a pervasive issue across southeast. The amount of time that fish are out of the water when you are catching and releasing, using the proper gear, equipment, inline circle hooks, shorter leaders, cutting the hook off and leaving that hook in if they are, gut hooked, using a rubber net. All these are just proper catch and release style things. And then the big one that I want everyone to come away from this podcast with is to lay off the big female redfish during spawning season this year. And if we do that over a long period of time, hopefully we can reverse this trend and see a good spawning class. I forget the words you use.
A year class.
Yes, of bigger red drum.
Geek scientist talk there for a year's worth of
yeah, and we
fish.
can reverse this bell curve. So let's come together as anglers and work on our redfish population here in South Carolina. Thank you guys so much for listening. Thank you so much, Matt, for being here. Really appreciate your time and educating on us on what we can do as anglers to help our redfish populations.
Thanks, Casey. Glad to be here.
Awesome. Thanks.